Good afternoon, everybody. Very pleased to welcome very high-level experts today for our Digitalization in Private Equity seminar. Today it's going to be led by someone very special to us, Jonathan Prince. Hi, Jonathan. Jonathan, we met a few months ago when we were both on the jury of the EY Startup World Cup. And we were very impressed with your intervention there because you're the moderator, the kind of I don't know how to call you, but someone nice who was supposed to be a bit tough on us as the jury members. And thanks to that, we discovered your extensive background in technology, ranging from different areas of the value chain, primarily financial services, if I can say. And then, of course, you're one of the co-founders of Finologee. And for those who don't know it yet, you're also co-founder of DigiCash, which is a success story made in Luxembourg. And although you're British, you do speak French with a relatively good accent. And you've been in Luxembourg for 10 years now. So thank you so much for hosting this on our behalf. I will be quite mute today, but I was very pleased to see that we managed to arrange a prestigious lineup that you're going to introduce. And I want to greet everybody else, Daniel, Kai, and Lee. But if you allow me, especially as a woman amidst all these talented men, I will jump in to interrupt you and ask hopefully intelligent questions that may interest our audience. And I will also track the Q&A session. And we will be together probably for up to an hour, depending on how lively our audience is. So enjoy and teach us a little bit about why digitalization is so important. And by the way, before I let you start, the reason why we wanted to host this is that a lot of our members, especially the GPs, but also the service providers, argue that in the end, the acceleration of digitalization of PE that is still a little bit backwards will happen thanks, if I can say that, to this COVID crisis. So let's find out more and please help us get some answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Raja. Thank you for your kind words, and indeed it was a pleasant event that we attended a few weeks ago, and indeed the broader audience and also various topics that were there. But today we're going to focus on the private equity industry, and so I felt that I had to wear a tie, and very funnily enough, I found one in my wardrobe. That was the first thing. But I think I'm wearing it mainly because I spent the past 6 weeks with my nose in the fridge, stuffing my face. So I'm probably a bit swollen now. So it helps keep something like thin.
So I got it wrong. I thought you were trying to adapt to the mentality of private equity. That's more conservative than yours.
Yeah, probably. We'll see through this nice panel that it's probably a not so conservative, and we've prepared this this webinar some days ago, and I was indeed very impressed with the different initiatives, and also with the valuable speakers we have today, true experts, and I'll let them indeed introduce themselves briefly, but maybe what I'm going to ask first, Lee, is we saw that the topic of this webinar was digitalization in private equity. Is it correct? Is it accurate to say that? Shouldn't we be speaking a bit about digitization? Lee?
Well, good question. Let me start off by introducing myself then. My background is IT and operations. I've spent most of my career moving from analog to digital, paper to print, from paper to print to electronic. I spent the last 11 years in a Luxembourg entrepreneurial business that did numerous transformations in its time. Most recently, I joined Intertrust to continue their journey on what we call transformation. And to answer Jonathan's question, transformation must start with the client experience. It doesn't start with technology. So I was being pedantic in our warm-up session that's asked the question, are we talking about automation of processes, which would be typically known as digitization? So something we've known in the past and are continuing to do today, but applying technology to it. Banks have been doing this for years in terms of transforming themselves through digital technology. And likewise, hotels. You can book online, you can do virtual tours, you can build up your points, etc. Digitalization is more about changing the model. And clearly in the hotel industry, Airbnb is a clear example of how they changed the model, and technology supported that new model. It wasn't the technology in itself that transformed the business, it was the model. So that was the points that we were trying to get across. So today will be interesting to see how much we diverge between digital and digitalization.
Thanks a lot, Lee. Maybe Daniel, would you like to add a bit and introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Hello everyone. I'm Daniel Engel, working for Braun Brothers Harriman in the alternative space, looking after sort of major relationships of the bank. Probably around 19 years experience in alternatives, covering the entire spectrum, primarily focused on the servicing side with a sort of stint on the GP side as well. And then perhaps just to talk a bit about the topic you just raised, fully agree with what Lee was just saying. I do actually find that digitalization and automation are sort of closely related and go a bit hand in hand. I think in the past years, we have seen a lot of work that has been done on the automation side, but we're now really venturing into this whole new world of digitalization. But I do think both go hand in hand. And if you do compare it, as Lee also was saying, to other areas, even within the fund or the investment fund spectrum, and you compare it to the UCITS world, for example, I think we're still sort of a few steps behind, but I think now we are really start of something sort of much larger, and I think private equity will also be having to embrace digitalization across the board.
Thanks a lot. And welcome.
Jonathan, just to remind the audience, you can ask questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screens, because you're okay to be interactive with that.
Indeed, they all agreed, and that's wonderful, and we need to thank them for that. And there will be also some polls, and so we'll ask you some questions later on during the session. And indeed, please give us your feedback and ask questions directly. That would be even more make it even more interactive. Kai, maybe also just based on your experience, and you'll introduce yourself, speaking about the digitalization, automation, and so on. Do you reckon the model is broken and needs fixing?
No, I don't think so. So Kai Braun, I'm a partner at PwC, and I'm heading the alternatives consulting practice. I don't think the model needs fixing, but I agree with all my previous fellow panelists that PE is probably fairly behind compared to other asset classes and other industries, financial industries. Still lots of Excel spreadsheets around. We've seen it now. Raja mentioned it. What does COVID do to us? COVID mainly does very basic things like introducing e-signatures and not having to print and physically sign and scan documents and put them in folders again. So it's these kind of basic things which are obviously not even real automation elements, but they're digitization initiatives which are happening, which happened prior to COVID already, but I think there's still quite some room to go and some way to go. If I think digitalization, what might kind of cause a real interruption is the whole elements around tokenization, both from an asset perspective as well as from an sort of investor perspective. We are quite far away to just wake up in the morning and take our mobile phone and buy a few shares of a PE fund, and maybe we're never going to get there because it's not really destined to kind of individuals. But still, there's quite a lot of room, and these are then the real digitalization elements that can happen. I think we're going to still spend quite some time today on this panel and in the coming months and years to fix a lot of the more digitization, as Lee is mentioning, and automation elements, because there's lots of room for improvement, for efficiency gains, bringing costs down, etc.
Thanks a lot. Well, the three of you, do you reckon that the private equity industry is lagging behind other industries? We mentioned I think all three of you have mentioned the banking industry, the retail banking, you know, with applications where you can order whatever and do a lot. And do you believe that they kind of paved the way, and but still facing similar issues as you are, as regulated entities, and somehow you feel that you probably didn't embrace it as soon as they did? Maybe Lee or Daniel?
Yeah, so I spent 11 years in the UCITS world, and I think there were two main drivers to the automation of a lot of things that I saw. First was regulation. Regulation put a huge amount of pressure on getting data compiled and put into a fixed format to be able to send to regulators or end investors very quickly. So that was something that was forced by the regulation. And the other was cost, of course. You know, the industry was put under a huge amount of cost pressure and therefore forced to look at other ways of delivering the solution to their end clients. And the combination of those two, I think, has forced a lot of change, which we probably haven't seen yet in the alternative side, not to the same capacity.
Yeah, I'll just probably add to that. Thanks, Lee. Fully agree. I think on the one hand, I think we are sort of a couple of steps behind other areas. I mean, again, not looking too far, staying within the investment space. If you look at UCITS, I think it's staying nigh compared to the alternative space or the PE space. However, the question is, do we need it? I don't even think that should be the question. I think it's pretty much inevitable that we will have to embrace digitalization. And I think within the PE sector and the broader alternative sector, I think we are now facing one more similar pressures, notably, as you just mentioned, regulation, and that's going to be increasing in the coming months. Because I've got DAX 6 sort of around the corner, that is just going to increase reporting and frequency. So digitalization will help make that overall process more efficient. And I guess the other pressure that we're seeing or the drive is really from LPs and GPs, where it's really about trying to access more data and a much more granular level than, I don't know, five or even 10 years ago, where it was much more about just pushing out sort of reports and sort of completed services and products, whereas now it's much more about giving access to data at a very granular level.
That being said, I mean, we all know that PE is much more manual, much more, one transaction different than the other, investors being much fewer, but having much more granular demands, different demands, etc. So it's not as easy to just say we put some robot and that robot is going to do a certain amount of tasks like they could do in the UCITS and in the banking world. That needs to be kept in mind. That being said, there are a number of things which partially have also evolved technology-wise, things like artificial intelligence, machine learning, being able to read documents now, whether they've been Word documents, PDFs, or even nowadays scans, handwritten documents, which can be identified by now, which can then collect a certain number of data. And I think the whole trend is not necessarily to make people abundant. We will still need those people in the PE world that take certain decisions, that use their brains, etc. That's what we're all here for. But they get a much better information by using technology. I'm always saying we need to come from an age of information to an age of intelligence, and this intelligence can only be currently through human brains, but the way information is being used and brought to the people that basically work every day, that comes through automation and technology.
Could you? Okay, so yeah, Lee, please.
Sorry, talking about regulation, because I think it is going to hit us. Isn't this a way that we can transform the model? At the moment, it's the onus is on the manufacturer to justify what they're doing, and there is a huge workload put into place to create a template of a regulatory requirement that's then submitted to a regulator that they then have to trawl through. I guess some regulators have automated a little bit in terms of the extract of the data, but wouldn't it make more sense to make the investment on the regulator side and then just expose the data from the manufacturer side, so the regulator does the work to go and test whatever they want to test. Whatever regulator asks us for, we give, usually. And therefore, if we're not exposing that through our own data that they can come in and investigate, they can ask whatever they like. And that's where you can start using more smart intelligence around IA and machine learning, rather than always forcing the direction of travel being the other way. One to many rather than many to one.
Are you advocating a national sandbox to start with, or because that was a topic raised what, six months ago to 12 months ago? Would that be your recommendation?
I don't think you can stop it at national, but it would be a good start. Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. We've been Daniel, do you want to add something, or Kai? No. Maybe because we've been talking about general statements that are fair and accurate, but it would be interesting if you could share some concrete examples, things that you've been running internally, you know, with either Intertrust or BBH or even PwC, just, you know, assisting and supporting some either service providers or PEs, just very specific use cases that you believe are valuable to other players, to the industry. Daniel?
Sure. So, okay, a couple of examples. I mean, I think that there are probably quite a few, but I mean, what we have been doing is we've been really looking at collaboratively, and I think that's sort of a key theme, that in order to progress all of this whole digitalization discourse, it needs to be happening in a collaborative way between the whole sort of industry. So consultants, services, GPs and LPs, and everyone needs to be sort of on board to ride this sort of wave. But what we, again, have been doing jointly with our clients is really looking at the entire sort of spectrum of services and products and the life, I would say, of the fund, and how we can sort of move to the next level. So not just automating, but really talking about digitalization. I think Kai briefly mentioned investors at one point. I think that is sort of key. And in terms of the whole AML KYC process that we all know can be quite cumbersome, we've really been sort of investing quite heavily also from a systems perspective, not just allowing us to make the process a bit more efficient internally, but much more also allowing to give access to our clients to have a sort of quite granular view of the sort of investors in the fund and their status relating to AML KYC, to the level of listing documents received, outstanding documents, renewals that are upcoming in terms of dates, etc. And then, of course, also being able to generate these sort of like information reports that I think clients are finding really quite useful. So that would be the first sort of bucket, I would say. Then in terms of the operational world, sort of day-to-day work in the past, again, quarter end or month end, you would just push out sort of your NAV pack and statements, but again, in report format. But we've been developing sort of workflow tools that allow GPs to access sort of the system in a way that allows them to see where in the process we are currently standing before pushing out the final sort of result. So it gives them, again, a much more sort of better view on where we stand in the overall processing that we're doing for our clients. And then last but not least, third bucket or pillar would be around the actual investments and the assets held by the funds. So again, it's just about sharing the data that we have and not just pushing out a report, but allowing to really allow clients to have much more access to the data that we hold. And that is, I guess, the one point that we are quite actively working on at the moment with our clients jointly. And that's where we also need to be collaborative in approach, because it's about defining what are the core data piece would require. So when we develop something, or we need that input, because it's crucial, because otherwise you're developing something that is of no need. And we all know that time to market does take a bit of time. But I would say in summary, these are the three sort of main pillars that we are really focusing on at the moment.
If I can just jump in there, Daniel mentioned information flow. I think one thing that's of importance is that we have to kind of push away and bring down some of the barriers we have in our heads. We're still used to sending thousands of emails and receiving thousands of emails every day. We're still used to produce Excel spreadsheets and again, ship them around. And some of the concrete elements that we've done at PwC with our clients is we've changed the way information flows. By, for example, bringing in Slack instead of emails, where you can then still see for certain categories, topics, whatever else, what has been communicated. Somebody that joins the firm newly can see all the history. If somebody leaves, that email does not suddenly go away, but it's still there to keep the information alive. Other elements are things like ticketing tools being used, ServiceNow, Zendesk, Jira, etc., for making sure that certain processes flow the right way. We've, for example, digitalized the whole client and fund onboarding for a PE house. They're saying we're going to bring 10 new funds to life over the next 18 to 24 months. We simply can't cope with that with our existing systems. By bringing in one of those ticketing systems, it allowed to bring certain tasks to certain people that then take decisions on, for example, the level of risk of a certain product, of a certain investor, of a certain investment, whatever it is. And it allows then later on in history to come back to that and say, okay, why have we taken a certain decision? And the decision is not somewhere in a paper stack. It's not somewhere in some email inbox. It's there in a system. Everybody can access it. And it's these kind of things that we currently are doing quite a lot in order to enhance the information and the usability of the information as well.
Lee?
Yeah, well, what's great is having spent sort of 25 years in technology and arriving in this industry, there was just so much to do. It's almost every week there's a new win. And I can't agree more with Kai that the increase of collaboration tools to kill this thing called email is terrific. And look, we've done a lot. We've automated some of the outputs in reports to transform Excel into something much more usable. But it all starts in any industry with data, and I liken data to water. It flows through in any organization. Unless you control it, it ends up where you don't want it to be. And in any instance, the closer you are to the source, the cleaner it's going to be. So really identifying where any data is being originated is the best place to start in any transformation, in any digital rollout. We've got a client, just one example, where us having bought Vitios, by the way, a year ago, has given us a massive acceleration in the access to technology. So this was possible because of that. So we have a private equity firm that has entities in Norway and Luxembourg, rolling up into a Lux entity that then got further fund based out of Jersey. And up until recently, they were sending any updates via email attachment. So recently they wanted to do a capital call, and the access to data was going to take days, and that reduced down to real time because the data was suddenly available at their finger points, allowing that decision-making process just to accelerate. And it's nothing new. The data was always there. It's just accelerated the time to market. And so when you look at where you prioritize first, we were looking at our client experience. And the client experience was, I need to make a decision now, and I don't have the information to hand. So we looked at where the information was, how do you get it to where it needed to be quickly enough, and you built the interfaces without replicating the data. This isn't ETLs, this is API world. The more layers you build, the further away from the source of the data, and the less pure the data becomes.
Jonathan, I want to contribute a question from the audience about how data is kind of transported through the value chain, especially to enable this digital transformation, especially in the context of a fund. I don't know if you can convey this to our speakers. you know, especially those who are fund administrators, who have to do with tax, maybe at PwC. So I think it concerns all the panelists.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's a great question of Nick from EQT. I know that you're obviously looking at that since a long time and at great detail, highly advanced there. I mean, I think the one element is that you need to define once and for all what are the different data points from the investor through the fund, through the SPV chain down into your portfolio company, have your kind of single source of truth, and then define for each of those data points who's in charge. There might be sometimes just one person in charge. If it's an SPV accountant somewhere in Italy, might be on fund level a number of people involved, whether it's a tax consultant, the deal teams that have a certain say, fund accountants, and these are things that just need to be defined. I don't think it's a one fits all for each of the data points, but it needs to be looked in a granular way.
I think I'm just going to repeat what I said before. Don't replicate the data, keep it as true to the source as possible. Yep. And then you trust the source. And if you can't trust the source, that's a different question altogether, but really just try and open up lines to the origination of the data.
Brilliant. Maybe we could have a first break and start with the first poll. I think, Luis, could you? Oh, wonderful. So the people attending the webinar, please answer this, and we'll use then the what has been provided in terms of answers for our panelists to reflect on that. Give you a couple of minutes.
Yeah. I don't know why, but I'm kicked out. I can't vote. It seems like I'm a biased party or something, and neither can you. Okay.
Click on polls. I think you can. No,
no, because we're hosts. It's okay. I'll talk to Luis later.
Please do. You're the boss. Maybe while people are answering the poll, Lee or Daniel or Kai, whoever feels like it. But so I think you mainly mentioned automating, so optimizing the existing, right? So it's a question, I think, between cost efficiency or becoming more efficient in running the operations and running your business. Do you see it also around the opportunity of building new products, new revenue streams, you know, diversification or whatever? You want to take that one?
I guess if I was in the audience, I'd probably tick all of those, obviously. And the one that's probably missing is client experience. I think I would always start with client experience. If you improve the client experience and you improve your employee engagement, usually the P&L follows. So if you automate and accelerate time to market, your client's going to be happier, they're going to invest more, and it helps you grow. If you can accelerate time to market, you're reducing your time to execute a task, and therefore you're reducing your cost. Any automation and removal of human intervention mitigates risk. So I think, you know, in any one digital project, I always start with client experience, and I think the others then become tick boxes afterwards.
And I will enlarge on that, because we also speak, I mean, I fully agree with Lee on client experience, but we also really focus on what we refer to as the investor experience. So it's broadening a bit, not just sort of looking directly at the GP, but also the underlying LPs, and trying to really enhance their experience by, again, giving them access to the tool and to data related to themselves, but also really counting on them to embrace the digitalization and really, to Kai's point earlier, moving away from email, but trying to do a lot of transactioning at an investor level through the system itself, you know, so that they can extract their reports and their data directly and upload any relevant information directly in the tool. So I think it's enhancing both client and the investor experience, And then from a sort of opportunities perspective, I think it does create opportunities, because the way we have structured sort of our digital offering, it's not just sort of looking sort of at one strategy within PE, but allowing clients to have a full view of the entire PE investment strategy spectrums, and especially our larger asset management clients. They really want to have that sort of condensed view across the various strategies, be it in PE or all of the alternative strategies, like one screen with that sort of full view across the platform. So I think that is definitely helping us to embrace these opportunities.
But I think the whole cost bucket is obviously only one side of the coin. There's really a way here to grasp new opportunities, maybe not necessarily in terms of new products, at least I'm not thinking of any, but in terms of enhancing your deal pipeline, the way you take deal decisions, etc. An example that's not necessarily directly PE, but more on the RE side, but that sticks a lot to my mind, is taking information and data from the GPSs of moving vans to find out which cities are losing population and which cities are gaining population. These kind of things, it's around data once again, but how do I capture that and how do I especially analyze that? Obviously helps in this case then real estate fund managers to define where am I going to buy, where am I going to sell. Those are things that probably a few years ago have not been used at all. And it's similarly on the PE side in terms of deal decision. It's also around valuations. You can nowadays automate a number of the valuations by taking existing deals, but not only, but really enhancing that with data from social media, etc., in order to automate valuations to an 80, 90, soon possibly 100% degree, rather than sitting down for a long time and doing DCF and whatnot. So I see really a lot of opportunity there, not just in the sort of back and middle office space by, yes, cost reduction initiatives, etc., but really in the front office space as well.
So we got the results of the poll first, and apparently everyone shares this view. It's mainly 63%. I believe everyone can see the results there, and so 63% cost reduction, indeed, makes a lot of sense. But still, I think that, there's also the extracting more value out of data and so on seems to be something that everyone agrees on, and complying with regulation. That is a key aspect for everyone here. And indeed, Lee, you mentioned that. Do you actually believe there's more regulation, more pressure on this side, or is it, or it's been so for the past 15 years? No.
Well, I think
recently.
I'd like to say no, of course not. But look, you don't need a sheriff in town if there's no Indians, right? And I think that it all depends on how we behave. I don't think there are anything looming. Just interesting on that poll, it's interesting to see cost and value. That's an easy one. And I'm glad to see a lot of people did tick all the boxes. But the lowest score was the closest you get to client experience. And if we don't change our view on that the investors don't count, that's shocking. And I'd like to maybe challenge the PE world to think differently about, surely it's the investor that matters. And it was way down there.
Well, Lee, but that was the whole point of this webinar, that the crisis is going to push us towards this. And there is actually another question from the audience about what is going to be the impact of COVID-19, because you could argue for some sort of complacency on the back of the success of PE. So what is it going to do to us? Maybe Jonathan can ask the question even more nastily.
Guys, is it a wake-up call for you? Is that nasty enough, or?
The problem is you never look nasty, so maybe you try to sound it.
Well, if I can continue on the theme, I actually don't think COVID will accelerate our response. I think we will get very excited about where we sit right now in digitalization, in term, not digitalization, I'm going to kill myself here, but about the collaboration. I mean, I experienced a call last week where we had a UK-based asset manager working with us on MS Teams, using OneNote to use the to do the minutes live. We were ragging every single open action point live in front of the client. We were using digital signature to sign off on stuff. And suddenly that's accelerated my transformation plan at least a year, if not beyond. So that in itself is the way we behave day in, day out. But the point I was trying to make just now, fundamentally, if we as an industry are not putting clients at the top of our mind, if we're not thinking that the investor matters, then we're going to fail in our long-term goal. I think we've had wind in our sails for many years, and we need to consider now, well, what benefit we bring into the investor, because that is our ultimate client, and how do we potentially change the model? Kai said earlier it's not broken, and I agree with him. I don't think it is broken, but maybe it needs to evolve.
I'll just jump off that as well. So just perhaps come back to COVID. I think the big question is the way that we're currently working going to become the new normal, or post-COVID crisis, whenever that may be? Don't think it's going to be the end of May, but looking further down the line, are we all going to go back into sort of the old patterns of working? I think most firms have been doing relatively well in adapting to the current COVID situation. And to Lee's point, I think everyone is using technology in various aspects, notably managing boards, minuting, the way information gets shared up and down the fund. And I think the question is, are we moving into more of a sort of low-touch economy? Are we going to be working all from home in the future, or spend much more time at home? And is hot desking going to become the new trend in the industry? I know the big fours, they've already embraced this long time ago, but is other sort of players in the segment in Luxembourg going to be embracing that much more? To be seen.
Kai?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I mentioned it on the onset, we see a lot of the progress already. We're all doing this session here virtually. Normally we'll probably be sitting in a room. People are maybe having one person in their office to open the snail mail, but you know, how long is that still required? Everything else is just happening digital. So like Lee was mentioning earlier on, it gave a big push, it gave an acceleration to what we're doing. But we're still very, very far away, because a lot of these initiatives simply cannot be done over a few weeks. You know, yes, you can implement an e-signature in a couple of days, no problem. You cannot build up a data structure, a master data management system within a few weeks. So there's still some way to go.
But Jonathan, one of our viewers is also asking, just to this point, a mid-sized Manco firm, very keen to understand where should they start to digitalize their process, and are there the right people to help them do so in Luxembourg? So guys, this is pitching time.
Maybe
we'll go shy.
No, because I'll take that one then. Maybe while preparing this webinar, we talked, and it will be one of the topics that I would love the speakers to address, the panelists to address, is the question of AML KYC. There's AML5, it impacts all the industry, not just the retail banks, and private equity will be impacted. So maybe that's one of the first aspects to be tackled. What are you going to do in terms of KYC? How are you going to manage the data? How are you going to manage onboarding, lifecycle management, remediation, whenever? So that is, I think, one of the key elements. Lee, do you share this view too?
Pick on me.
Yeah.
You know I do. I think this is the exact example of where you need to change the model, because technology is not the blocker here. We've had technology around for years that could fully automate the KYC chain, and other industries do it very well. We need to think differently about the model. Look, a company like ours that has 50,000 entities can reuse the UBO and the PEP information that we've got across multiple users. Yes, we have a blockchain solution for it, but we can only use it within the confines of our own company. So if one of our clients has a direct that's also on another client and we have approval, we can use the same information. but it really is the model that needs to change. And as I say again, everyone's blockchain was the sweetheart last year and the year before, and I always ask the question: blockchain may be the solution, but what was the question? And this is exactly our opportunity to think differently about what is KYC, how do we respond to it. I could go on for hours, but I'll let others.
Yeah. Daniel, or
I would at the back of that. I mean, I'm not sure who the Manco was just raising the question, but it's really about thinking. It's thinking about what they need from their perspective. And I think one theme that we haven't really talked too much about yet is about control. So it's about what do they need in order to be performing their function and their control function in itself. So the way we are collaborating with AFMs and Mancos in general is sort of, again, collaboratively working hand in hand and getting sort of data feeds sort of across in a highly automated manner, which I think it's less conceptual than we were just talking a second ago, but perhaps makes it a bit more, hopefully a bit more concrete. So ideally working with I guess, with the right partners who allow you to get what you need in order to be controlling or performing your control function.
And this, Anna, just call me. I'll plenty to tell you about that one, and we can help you for sure.
This is important, Jonathan, what you're saying. The webinar is a teaser, and then members are welcome to contact you separately, I guess, if you're all happy with that. So yes, this is supposed to be the beginning of a long fruitful exchange.
It was just a joke, but Kai, but you can still call me indeed, or send me an email. I'll be happy to help you with that one. Kai, before we actually launch the second poll, which will be about COVID, in fact, and how the audience sees the impact of it, maybe you want to add about the impact on the Mancos. What should they focus on? Well, you could indeed also push them towards your colleagues from the advisory part, but indeed, if you want to just add some.
Yeah, no, I'm obviously part of that advisory team. I want to say something on Lee's AML comment. I agree that this is one of the elements where the model is kind of broken, and one of the reasons why it's broken is because each of the different asset services have got different standards. There's no real harmonization. So I'm not saying it would require regulatory push here, but it would just need sit around the table and saying, okay, for AML, KYC, this is what we're going to ask, and we're going to all ask the same questions, so that the GPs don't have to fill in 10 different AML KYC forms if they're working with 10 different banks. Just a small element. So it's not only about digitalization, it's really also about how what kind of information is being asked. Coming back to the question of the Manco, I think the most important element is to see where are there breakage points of real manual work that could possibly be either automated or at least digitalized. It's a matter of making an assessment, running through the different operations, seeing where there are handover points, breakage points between different systems, between different departments, etc., and start from that, because those are typically then the low-hanging fruits.
I think we got the poll. Luis, should we push it again? Indeed. And then there's a question from Alan. Is there a future in private equity for smart contracts on APIs? So it's a mix of smart contracts and APIs. Gents, who wants to take that one? I will point to someone if you.
No, I'm happy to at least give it a shot. I clearly see a future there. Smart contracts is something that's going to come. We know how much time we spend on really going through all these different paper versions, etc. How burdensome it is to pass property whether it's company or through a real estate property from one hand to another. And on this, the whole tokenization element will help. There's some concrete examples already out there. On the other hand side, moving things through systems by means of APIs obviously is a necessity as well. I know that there's still a number of ERP systems out there which are still way too closed up, meaning they don't allow for data inputs in a way that would help the industry, but that is clearly a way forward, yes.
I can add to, I guess the question of smart contracts, absolutely. It's about the open architecture and how you communicate between different systems of smart contracts. I'm not sure I totally understand the use of API, and Alan, give me a call afterwards because we can certainly talk it through. But smart contracts is going to come our way, and it's a great opportunity for us to accelerate. But you got to address the architecture challenge.
And can I play dummies for private equity for dummies? What is a smart contract, please?
Who wants to take that one?
Come on,
I guess you know, right? Come on, guys.
It's a matter of bringing paper contracts into an electronic shape or form.
Okay, so it's just a buzzword to say digitalizing your contracts.
I love it. I just love it when. Yes, indeed. And if you add a bit of blockchain on top of it, then it becomes huge, and it becomes valuable for VCs too. It was.
Which was my question around APIs, but let's let Raja. Why don't we do a smart contracts and blockchain for dummies as an LPEA? Cool.
If you volunteer to writing it, happy to help.
Happy to.
That's a great idea. I think it's also a way to trigger some sort of momentum.
I think Kai's being shy as well. By the way, he's the expert there on the table. But we'll get our heads together and do it very easily.
I think we're on the hook.
We can go back to talking about the whole harmonization of protocols, etc., which is probably again the key issue here. But yeah, more than happy.
There you go. Let's do it.
Gentlemen, and I think we will have probably the results of the poll. And I saw one of the people, Luigi, was saying he would have selected all of them, and I think that's a fair point on the impact and changes of COVID. We're almost at the end of this panel, so would you have some takeaways? Lee, maybe, if you want to kick off.
Yeah, and it's actually quite linked to the COVID in a way, and yeah, it's not really linked to digitalisation because I'd rather talk about the model, but rather than labelling that point too far, I'm very not worried or concerned, but I've had a number of notaries and a number of law firms that have said to me, we cannot hold board meetings unless you have the people physically in the room. A number of regulators have given us a short-term reprieve, but we all know that this COVID situation is going on for a long time. And to Daniel's point, we're never going to go back to the office like we did before. So I even feel, I think we even spoke about it on the panel last week, that if I phone my contact in New York and say, I'd love to come over and see you, they'll say, why? I'll do a VC. I just think it's going to change the way we do things. And therefore, people will need to change their behaviors. And I think as we come out of this world, and again, it's not digitalization in my view, but it's the regulators, lawyers, notaries in Switzerland in particular, have to accept that face-to-face meetings are not necessarily going to be a thing in the future. It's a want to have and a nice to have rather than a need to.
Lee, can we maybe make a difference between meeting someone for the first time and then maintaining an ongoing relationship instead? And I'm thinking now as a GP or LP, if you meet a team that you're supposed to invest in and you've never met them face to face,
we know each other well enough that I'm very much a people's person, and I love meeting people face to face. But if it's about expediency, I can get on a video call in 10 minutes and speak to someone in New York. If I've got an immediate investment opportunity that I want to discuss with colleagues that are in the other parts of the world, I can do it immediately. I've got 5 managing directors that I used to meet maybe once a month. I now meet them every single day. So yes, there's a time and a place for both, but I think in terms of business, we have to get much more comfortable with doing things via video. And then we can still have a glass of rosé on a Friday evening in Limpetsburg.
You're on the
agree
hook
with,
again, huh? Second time in a row.
and I fully agree with what Lee was saying. I think that is what we're going to be seeing more and more of, but I think it's still, perhaps as a caveat, I think it's going to take a bit longer for people and all participants probably to sort of embrace it fully as the new way of working. And I think sort of underlying, I think it's technology is really helping us to communicate in these times, but is nice. And Roger, to your point, first time meetings, absolutely. I think it's going to be difficult to just do it all by video, but I think we all agree that it's probably going to be the way forward, and we're going to see much more of it in the coming weeks and months.
Kai?
Yeah, I think we have to...
so just considering also the specificity of Luxembourg, because if I may, it's mainly around back office, right? So in this industry and in others too, we're very much focused on the back office part and middle office more and more. But so because what you were saying about meeting people is key when it comes to front office, right? The business development part, it's essential. That's how it happens. But then, what would you consider and then add your key takeaways to this webinar?
Yeah, I think as a back and middle office hub, the most essential thing is that we help out of Luxembourg the front and partially middle office people, the deal guys, the investor relationship guys, help them do their job properly. And that means if they've got a request, they want to turn it around at a very decent quality in a very short period of time. And throwing additional bodies at greater fund sizes, more funds, bigger elements just simply won't work anymore. So I think we have to leave some of our old thinking behind and really fully embrace this digitization and digitalization journey. And I think COVID is, as we mentioned earlier on, a great accelerator because it shows to us that life still goes on. I mean, we're probably all of us since 5-6 weeks in home office, and things continue to work, and that's a very, very positive example. I'm sure had I as a consultant gone to a client and say, as from tomorrow we're all going home without COVID, they would have all said, no, you're totally crazy, it's way too drastic change, nothing is ever going to happen, nothing is ever going to work. But here we are and everything is working, so it's a very positive sign in that sense.
So if I may just summarize a bit what has been said up to now and your key takeaways. So basically, considering the specific context of Luxembourg, it's pretty much focusing on back office operations. So there's improving data, the quality of data, because that's the key element on which the industry relies, and doing business is based on the data you collect, you maintain, or you update. And so digitization could indeed help not only collect data in a different way and be more cost efficient, but also improve the data that you will have. So it's data sourcing, it's data management, and the way of structuring it requires to have a clear strategy on it for each and every. So it applies to all type of stakeholders, including the mancos that there was a question coming from one, but it's key for each and every of the stakeholders in this industry. Then maybe indeed the aspect is not only looking at optimizing the existing processes and procedures that are in place, but seeing it probably in a broader horizon and anticipating the fact that life is going to change, everything is going to change. So also seize new opportunities. Don't limit it to optimizing the existing, but go a bit beyond that and look at it also in terms of user experience internally, but also for your clients, because that's the key element of it. I think that digitization is a way of improving your daily life and life at work also. So basically, there's a lot to do. We're kind of lagging behind a tiny bit with the PE industry. Things could be better, and that was also your message, your key message, Lee. I think let's do something about it. Start engaging. It's collaboration also with the different stakeholders. It be more open APIs. Yeah, surely, indeed, that's a way of just embracing or getting new products or things done without having to impact the entire infrastructure and do massive investments. You can do things already that will not jeopardize the entire operations and business. You can optimize bits by bits like that. And yeah, indeed, time to market is key. So it's time to do it. Is that something fair? Yes.
I see everybody nodding. Yes, Jonathan, I think we got so many hooks today. So this is my offer to you guys. You're all members of LPEA. You're all goodwill ambassadors. Let's do this seminar in September again, see where we got to, with Jonathan, of course, as a checkpoint. And meanwhile, this will be the time for us to write that report that you mentioned, Lee, and we can share it online live after the summer. And so we have a few months to get ahead. So let's push the membership and the industry towards this trend. And I guess it will be pushed anyway. So yes, that's what I wanted to say. And thank, of course, Jonathan and the great panelists. I learned a lot personally, so I hope it's the same for the viewers.